within this broader social welfare remit, where do behavioral addictions sit in terms of FSWS priorities?
Okay, so I have to say that kind of behavioral addictions is something which is quite recent, okay, especially when it comes to us in Malta, but generally, when we talked about behavioral addictions, we always talked about gambling. So that was the main behavioral addiction that was always existent. Okay, but now things are changing a lot with social media, gaming, and all this stuff, kind of constantly changing a bit the panorama of what we mean by obviously behavior addictions. The remit is changing, and with it, the importance of tackling behavior addictions is changing and obviously rising in priorities. We have seen a change in society, okay? The gamification of almost anything in recent years has brought about changes to those kind of then developing problematic use of certain behaviors. And in this sense, obviously, we are constantly adapting to what we're observing. We invest a lot even in trainings, okay? When trainings back then were focused only on gambling, now we go to behavior addiction conferences like ICBA, and we try to attend to kind of get the best information and the latest information when it comes to kind of the changing scene in gaming. And obviously this because we are seeing the early kind of stages of people developing problematic behaviors with social media and gaming. So it's quite a recent thing for us. We're seeing it with the newer generation of people developing these difficulties. But obviously we are envisaging that this is going to be possibly the thing that kind of could take a bit over when we talk about the relationship between substances and behaviors.
With the expansion of regulated iGaming and increased digital accessibility, what emerging trends or risks patterns has FSWS observed in recent years?
Yeah, obviously, some of the bigger difficulties that we're encountering is with mostly younger generation. What we're kind of making out of it is that this is possibly the first generation that was brought up in kind of this kind of atmosphere, this kind of availability. So whereas older generations possibly we did not have this accessibility, the younger generation have this accessibility and the possibility to develop a problematic relationship or abuse of the way it is using it is coming at an earlier stage for them, you know. So for example, if I'm a 40-year-old, okay, and I haven't had so much access to social media, for example, possibly my years where I was kind of doing certain level of development, even brain development, emotional regulation and stuff like this, wasn't hampered by kind of issues and behaviors that could possibly now be impacting the way that I behave. Obviously, we are now having youths in their early 20s, okay, who have possibly developed this difficult relationship with the way they use social media, games, and stuff like that, which is possibly impacting them at a developmental stage. So at this point, possibly they could have more repercussions in the future.
Prevention and early intervention are core principles of what you do. What strategies are currently used to raise awareness and reduce gambling-related harm before it escalates?
Yes, obviously our biggest aim is to prevent. Sedqa has almost, I think, quite uniquely an equal side of it to prevention as much as to care. You know, so I mean, it's quite. We have a prevention team, okay, which is some 20 people, okay, who are constantly working on prevention strategies. We have prevention strategies that start as early as 7. Obviously, we don't talk about addictions as such at that age, but we talk about skills that would ultimately prove to be kind of coping strategies for the future for these people, for these young children that are kind of growing up. We are starting to introduce the notion of correct social media use. We invest a lot in teaching young people how not to be scammed in an environment where usually you as a user have no oversight as to what is happening and what are the scams and what's that and what's this. So giving knowledge for us is paramount. We do believe that ultimately knowledge is a key, even if we advocate, even on a policy level, obviously to have also the industry be part of this regulated kind of milieu. So what we do is we invest a lot in giving prevention, in teaching and giving digital literacy to youths in order to obviously prevent them from developing difficulties in the future, whilst working on skills. You know, they need skills. Usually it is the lack of skills or knowledge that leads or could be a precursor to problematic use of substances and obviously also behavioral addictions. So for us, it's very important to equally invest in prevention as well as care as a later stage when needed.
In your view, how can media platforms contribute to awareness raising in a way that is responsible and socially protective?
I think that all media platforms have kind of an obligation to be part of this whole milieu of stakeholders that are ultimately trying to kind of develop a place where people can feel safe. And I'm saying people now because even adults, young adults, and even older adults are usually encountering difficulties when they relate to other people, even on social media. So our aim is always to kind of bring everyone together. And media has an important role because media is within the sector. And usually the tools that media has and the gaming industry has to develop the tools, the kind of even profit-making products, okay, are actually the same tools with which we can prevent. So if you're coding for something to be nice and engaging, you could also code for something to be kind of making you aware of the time you're spending on it. So our aim is also to bring everyone together, the industry, media, with lots of digital literacy that it can offer, and also all the things that it can help people gain knowledge with. You know, so when we see media, kind of, we see it as a resource, even if sometimes it can be seen in a bad light because it's part of the kind of the things, you know, the cluster of availability to media and social media and gaming. But for us, it's not about demonizing anyone. It's about bringing everyone to kind of an agreed way, a mode of action that can be enshrined in policy, preferably. You know, and this is why even for us, the state and the legislator is obviously a very important stakeholder.
What are the main barriers that prevent individuals or families from seeking help for gambling-related harm, and how do you work to overcome these barriers?
Okay, so with behavior addictions, I think one of the biggest issues is the fact that one realizes he actually has an addiction or she actually has an addiction. I think that I find that as the most significant kind of stumbling block for someone approaching service, especially at an earlier stages. Okay, it seems that it is much easier with substances to realize that you have an issue. Okay, and even with substances, to say the truth, there are substances that, you know, with which you develop a marked problem much earlier than with others, so there tends to be a bit of a latency. When it comes to gambling, for example, one of the main issues is the issue of the available money. So people tend to come to service when an issue would have been developed, but it's not the gaming issue that they are looking into, but the lack of funds at this point in time, or owing money to loan sharks or to family members, But yes, we find that there is a bit of a latency for a person to realize there is an issue. And usually when they present with the issue, they tend to see as the money owed more as the issue rather than the gaming itself. So in itself, it's also the way we conceptualize the difficulty that sometimes clashes with the person in front of us. Obviously, we do understand the perspective of the person. We always say that a person will realize he has an addiction problem when it hampers his functionality. And this functionality is available money. Obviously, that is going to be the issue with which the person will present. Our work will always be for us to kind of discuss with the person and kind of look into what is the source of this issue, but more than that, even possibly the source of where this is coming from and why is it a behavior that a person is continuously repeating, in order to kind of eliminate the source or the raison d'être for this thing being done.
What message would you like to share with the public about recognizing risk early and accessing support services?
Yes, I think one of the most important things is that kind of we do understand that self-diagnosis is very hard. So sometimes coming to services like ours, picking up a phone and having a chat with us could help the person get an outsider's look. A person who knows what's going on and possibly hint at difficulties that could be arising. Maybe the person is not an addict, because there is this this big word addict, which has a lot of stigma to it. And we don't discuss about you being an addict. It's not if you're an addict, you need help. If you're finding yourself in discomfort with the behavior you're doing, you need help. So for us, if a person decides to talk with us and he talks about the difficulties he's having or she's having, and would like to share things and why is it so important and how does one end up doing it even if they thought maybe yesterday night that they will not do it again. These are all things that they can share, discuss with us, and we can evaluate together if this is developing into a problematic thing. It's not a matter of how addict you are, okay, because that has nothing to do. It's what you'd like to address out of this developing issue. So for us, a very important message is check with people around you, with those who love you, with us as professionals about what you're doing, the doubts you're getting about if this is problematic or not. Having a frank discussion about it could really help open a bit your insights into what is happening, why is it happening, and if it actually needs addressing with professional help or not.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.